Hello and welcome to the Bucket Lister podcast. Join your host Keith Crockford along with special guests who have travelled the world, here to share stories of their adventures and plenty of inspo to add to your bucket list. Now, let's get into today's episode.
Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. Today I am chatting with Emily Bailey. Hello Emily.
Hello, Keith. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Now, I think this could become quite a bit of a controversial topic in terms of Emily runs her own consultancy called Just Tourism. She's a sustainable tourist consultant. And obviously, I think in terms of the biggest issue here is tourism sustainable? Is it in terms of the environmental impact that tourism has on the environment, etc.? And I just thought it'd be a really interesting conversation today to kind of get down into the nitty gritty of it all and actually look at how is we as travelers can be more sustainable within what we're doing. And I think that's kind of the important thing, because obviously I can't just sit there and say I'm not going to travel again because we run a travel company. So I wanted to get Emily on today to kind of give us all a bit of a lesson, if you like, in terms of how we can be more sustainable. What is sustainable tourism? It's not just a case of let's stop flying everywhere and help the environment. There is plenty more to that. So I think we should just get into the conversation and see how we get on. So Emily, do you want to give us a quick rundown on how you became a sustainable tourism consultant?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on. So I started 20 years ago with a large adventure tour operator in the UK, and I had various jobs within the industry between then and now. And the last 2 years, I've taken a bit of time out and done my master's in sustainable tourism. So it's always been something I've been passionate about. And I just really wanted to go ahead and focus just on the sustainability side of tourism and make sure that basically we're just being good tourists, good travel companies, and helping other travel businesses to put together measurable and robust sustainable tourism plans.
Now, we had a quick chat before we came online, and one thing that interested me with what you said was how you said we shouldn't have the word sustainable tourism. It should just be tourism. Do you want to give me a little bit of what you meant by that?
So, so sustainable tourism is basically putting an adjective in front of tourism. I've been around long enough to see it go from responsible tourism to sustainable tourism, and now we're going into regenerative tourism. So all of these things are how tourism should just be. It should be responsible, it should be sustainable, and it should be regenerative. So I'd like to, in the future, just be tourism.
And there are almost like three pillars to sustainable tourism, isn't it? People might just have the impression that with sustainable tourism, it's all about the environment. It's all about we need to stop flying in aeroplanes. And that just isn't the case, is it? Because COVID completely taught us that.
Absolutely. So the three pillars of sustainability, personally, I'm not keen on the word pillars either, because you can knock a pillar over and there'll still be two other pillars left. They are the environment, social aspects, and the economic impacts. Obviously, we took away the economic benefits of tourism during COVID, and that had severe social and actually environmental effects. There were bits that made the environment better, but also if you think of conservation in Africa that's funded by tourism, that was then taken away. So the tourism industry, and there is academic research on this, has shown that we focus quite a lot on the environmental aspects of tourism, but the social and economic benefits are huge as well. So so I'm not going to stop flying. Keith, I know you're not going to stop flying. We just need to think about how tourism works, whether we fly less, we consider taking the train to short haul destinations. Keith, we spoke before about when you choose flights for your groups, you tend to go for, if available, the direct flight. And that is a really good thing to do because the carbon impact of a flight is most at takeoff and landing. So if you do a direct flight, you're only doing that once. If you do indirect flights, you potentially do that 2, maybe 3 times. So yeah, I think we need to go beyond just thinking about carbon and the environment and think about how we can become more socially aware of the impacts of tourism. And personally, I think tourism can make a big difference to the way people have an outlook on the world. So for us all to be kind of global citizens of understanding different cultures and different ways of living and different different languages, it's so important that we still know about all of that, as well as being aware of our environmental impact, which is at the moment huge. Obviously this weekend we've just had the coronation and everyone's been going on about how King Charles knew about this 50 years ago. Yeah, we did know about this 50 years ago. So, but it's getting to crisis point now and we just need to balance everything.
Yeah, I think, and it was interesting as well what you said before we went live on the podcast about how airlines are investing money in research and trying to find cleaner fuels, electric powered planes, etc. And obviously, if we take that money out of stopping flying, then they're the people that are currently investing money into those new technologies, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah. So I think I mentioned EasyJet. They're one of the better airlines for if you look at what they're investing in, and along with big airline manufacturers, I can't remember which one it is, but they've got an option on more sustainable aircraft. The airlines that have newer fleets tend to be a bit better, and there are small electric planes coming in. They're obviously no good for long haul flights, but if you think of places like the Africa, where there's quite a lot of short haul hops around between different,
like the Maldives, for example. Like
yes, inter-island flights in the Maldives, electric planes. That is coming. So, but if we take our money away from the airlines, they're not going to have the income to be able to introduce those technologies.
So as a tour operator then, which is in essence what we are, what could we be doing to help this process to become a more sustainable travel company?
Yeah, so Bucket List has been built on from a sort of sustainable background, really, and you can choose your local partners that are doing good things in destination and make sure that they are locally owned, locally run, that they're employing local people, and that they understand what they need to do in their locality to ensure that the environmental and the environment is protected, the culture is protected, but equally that people are getting an income from tourism.
And I think that's important to say. Where we first met really was you were working for a company called the Adventure Connection, who you put us in touch with local providers. And kind of since we set up the Bucket List company, we have been working with the Adventure Connection to introduce us to new destinations, new partners. And those new partners that you take on board to introduce would have gone through a process of making sure all that happened in the first instance.
Yeah, absolutely. There are big operators, worldwide operators out there that probably don't have that local partnerships that with these small businesses that are really acutely aware of their the needs of the local area. And I know you guys do choose the ones that really do care and really do make a difference. So for when people are choosing which tour operators to travel with, it's important that they know who the local, not necessarily named, but know that there is a good choice going on by that operator, and that it tends to be the adventure operators are much better at it. That doesn't mean that all adventure is sustainable, but it is a good choice.
And as an individual then, who is looking to book a trip, how can they, obviously we discussed that they could look at direct flights, but what else can they be doing, even down to the simplest things, to become a more sustainable traveller?
Yeah, so I feel like the most simple thing is, and it's not just bottles, don't take any single use items. So we'll try not to use them at all. It's thinking about, can you go for longer? I don't know if they still exist, but there used to be like weekend breaks to go and see the gorillas.
Yeah.
So traveling long haul for a weekend. Whereas actually, if you're going to go long haul, it's far better to go for longer. Most of your trips are over 10 days, aren't they? So with the option to extend while you're out there. Short haul, I know bucket lists have only got a few European destinations, but look at taking the train over flying. You get a really lovely experience as well taking the train. You could, if you did an annual city break and an annual adventure, you could combine the two by taking the train across to Paris or Amsterdam, having your city break, and then going onwards to Southern Europe, Western Europe. And sometimes just taking that extra 10 minutes to research the people or the company that you're traveling with. So have they got a sustainability policy? Are they looking at their carbon reduction plan? Are they aiming for net zero? Are they offsetting, or are they actually making a difference? So yeah, there's lots of little things that consumers can do to basically choose differently, and if they put their money with the right companies, then the other companies that aren't doing these things will soon have to follow.
I think that was really interesting because we work with a provider in Thailand, and it's just, they've got a brilliant sustainability project or program, policy, how they operate. And it's down to the simple things, like they won't use hotels that use the single-use shampoos and conditioners that you get in every hotel. And once I started working with Steve like 3 or 4 years ago, it really made me look at what we were looking at and what we were booking to think, actually, that it's only a really small difference, but if everybody did the same thing, that difference would become huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, looking at hotels that and not just on the single-use items, looking at food as well. Are you using hotels or choosing a hotel that has a buffet for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and therefore creating a mountain of food waste? I know, Keith, you've been to the Maldives recently. Big resorts out there, you can probably get steak that was Angus steak from Scotland in resorts in the Maldives, but why would you? So looking at even big hotel chains have got sustainability plans, and a lot of that is around reducing food waste, reducing consumption of energy. So how much water they're using, particularly in destinations where water is scarce. Are they somewhere sunny, and do they have solar panels on the roof? So if there's two hotels that either a tour operator is going to choose or a consumer is going to choose directly, one's got solar panels and one hasn't, it's far better to choose the one using greener energy. A lot of the big resorts, again, it's back to that investment as well, that a lot of big hotel chains do have the money to invest in sustainability. So it's not ignoring the big hotel chains, looking at the ones that are doing the good things. Local guest houses and local accommodation are also great because more of them money stays within that community. But also they will have a look at how they're operating within that area. Are they using local food suppliers? Are they doing a la carte meals so that there isn't that food waste? There's lots to think about. It's almost too much for the traveller themselves to think about. It's very much on the tour operator or the hotel provider to make those changes so that the consumer doesn't really have to think about it too much.
Yeah, I think it's how you relay that information as well. And that's one thing that I know we've been talking about is how we share that information with our consumers. Because although it's front of mind with us and it's what we're doing, we probably don't publish that information that much in reality and tell the story of what we're trying to achieve. Absolutely,
yeah. And there is a move towards being more transparent, having measurable targets, and producing annual impact reports. So an impact report doesn't have to be, oh, look how great we are. We can say, well, this is where we are now, and this time next year, this is where we want to be. And that can be things like we want to reduce our carbon by so much so that by 2050 we're net zero. Or it could be that we know that this much money from that tour stays in the community, but we want to increase that by however much percent. Or we only employ 5 female guides all over the world and actually would quite like that to be a bit higher. And how are we going to do that? And what is our target on that? And then the next year saying, actually, we did all right on these ones, but these ones we still need a bit more help to achieve, but still publishing that information. Personally, I think there's nothing wrong with saying, this is what we wanted to do, we tried, we haven't quite got there, so we're going to have another little go at it. And for consumers to be able to see that, it's far better than saying, oh, we've paid thousands of pounds for carbon offsetting, and that means it's fine, because that's not fine.
And there are so many stories on carbon offsetting that, you know, actually it doesn't really happen. Like, what's your viewpoint on it?
My viewpoint is it's the final thing you do. So you don't just say, you don't work out what your carbon was this year, pay an offsetting scheme. And there's some good ones, there's some bad ones, there's some mediocre ones. And offsetting can be planting trees, it can be carbon removal schemes, it can be rewilding projects. It doesn't have to be like that one tree costs this amount of carbon, because that's not true either, because it takes 35 years for a tree to get to a good amount of carbon sequestration. So my thoughts on it are, don't do it, but do it as the final thing. So you've measured what you're doing, you've looked at ways within your product or your tour that could reduce that. So it could be you've got an internal flight, whereas actually you can get an overnight train. So it's making those changes within an itinerary. And then at the very end, making sure that you're choosing an offsetting scheme that's relevant for yourself, for your business. So for key for you, it could be that you've got a few around the world that actually in Tanzania you donate to this charity because they're doing good things on carbon there. In Jordan, you're doing something else so that it's locally relevant as well. Or have an away day with your team and go off with the Wildlife Trust here or the Woodland Trust and plant a load of trees for them.
Yeah. And that's something that individuals can do as well, not just us as a business. That's something that they can look at following in the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I live in the Chilterns and we've got a community interest company called the Chiltern Rangers, and they're an environmental company, and they I go off every couple of months and help them clear land so that all the old biodiversity that used to be there can then come back. So it's not an official offsetting scheme, but me and my family are going out and doing something that is actually making a difference to our local environment.
And the one thing that taught me in the Maldives was obviously obviously I talked about this on the podcast last week about our trip to the Maldives. And we went and visited local islands and we spent money in the local community rather than on the resorts. Because, the resorts are owned by hotel chains around the world. They're probably not employing all local people, whereas on the islands, you're being looked after by locals. The money is going back into the community. What can people do when they are visiting foreign countries to make sure that actually they are giving back?
Yeah, so again, that's I think it's important that the tour operators have taken the lead on that they are only visiting good tourism products and having good experiences, and making sure that they have researched where the money is actually going, and actually that community, it's community-led tourism, not community-based tourism. So it's going somewhere and getting involved with the community rather than going and watching it. So it's an interactive experience rather than a passive experience. So it could be a cooking experience, somebody showing off their culture and keeping traditions going as well. And that's where the regenerative tourism comes in. It's kind of using tourism as a means to ensure that cultures and traditions are kept alive.
And I suppose it's simple things like don't go and buy your dinner from McDonald's, go and eat in a local restaurant.
Yeah.
Like it's
absolutely, yes.
Simple things like that.
Yeah, and for me, particularly in cities, I have like a 2-street rule. So you've got your big hub of, I don't know, I'll use Paris because I was there recently, around the Champs-Elysees, which, expensive. You walk 2 streets back, everywhere's empty and a third of the price. So yeah, it's having just not getting necessarily sucked into the tourist trail, and thinking more about how you would live as a local.
Yeah, I think that's what we try and do on all of our trips, is try and immerse those experiences, like cooking classes, all of those things. Like even when we were, I'm heading off to the Lares trek to Machu Picchu tomorrow, and it's interesting that when you think of the Lares trek, it is so community based, and you were going to go, and we were like digging potatoes with the locals last time, and going and drinking, in their local bars as we're wandering through, and getting a real experience of it. But then, they're getting money because they're allowing us to have those experiences with them. We're not sat there paying to watch them dig potatoes. We're getting involved to be part of it, going into their houses, having a cup of tea with them, learning about the lives that they live. But, they are getting money for that to allow us to have that experience, but at least the money is staying there within the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting as the bucket list company are doing the Lares trek to Machu Picchu, not the standard trail, because that's another thing that people can do. They can choose alternative routes, I suppose, to what would be the normal tourist trail. So obviously over tourism was a big issue before COVID. It went from over to no, so it kind of fixed itself in a couple of years, but it's coming back. If you're looking at like city tourism, go to, I know I said I went to Paris and it was busy. You could go to like Marseille instead of Paris, or go to Split instead of Dubrovnik, or just thinking about how you're going to get that very similar experience, but it not be as touristy, and also spreading your tourism spend beyond the main hubs.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, the great news for me is I don't need to stop flying. So thank you, Emily, for confirming that. I did think we were going to kind of have a little bit of an argument on that one, but I'm glad that's not the case. But thanks for coming on. It's been really informative to understand. I know we're going to be doing some more work with you, looking at how we can become more sustainable with what we do with the Bucket List Company. So thanks for coming on and chatting with us today.
Thank you for having me.
No problems at all. Thanks for listening, everyone. I hope you found that really interesting. And, look at what, whether you book with us, whether you book with somebody else, whoever you're booking with, just have a look and see what the companies that you're booking with are doing. And it's something that we completely need to do more of on our website, because we are doing it. We're probably just not telling you quite well enough that we are. So until next week, thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. Be sure to click follow to be alerted for next week's episode. For more travel inspiration, check us out at www.thebucketlistcompany.co.uk or follow us on socials. See you next time.